This episode is brought to you by Disney+. Disney+, Hulu, ESPN+, stream all your favorites with the Disney Bundle. Disney+ has Loki and Luca. On Hulu, watch originals like American Horror Story and 9 Perfect Strangers. And ESPN+ has every match of Spain's thrilling La Liga. Get the Disney Bundle today for only $13.99. Includes Hulu ad-supported plan. Access content from each service separately. Terms apply. See thedisneybundle.com for details.
Hey, everybody. This is Charles Hain here for the No Film School podcast for the week of September 9th, 2021. I'm here with filmmaker and writer and podcaster Kath Tolentino.
Hello.
And cinematographer and writer Todd Blankenship.
Hey, how's it going?
And we are going to be talking about the big, massive opening for Shang-Chi over the weekend. We are going to be talking about a good deal, bad deal, about working on holidays. And then we have 2 pieces of tech news this week. Both Fuji and Red, interesting announcements we want to talk about this week on the No Film School podcast. All right, so our top story this week, Shang-Chi opened with the second biggest opening of the pandemic. And there's a bunch of things in here that are relevant to filmmakers. First off, second biggest is not usually that big news, but the biggest was Black Widow. And Black Widow is ScarJo, who's been a celebrity forever. And Black Widow has been part of the Avengers thing. And like there was a lot of pre-built marketing building on that. Shang-Chi is a newer character in the Marvel Universe. I mean, been in the comics for a long time, but newer in terms of getting more prominent placement. So there's not as much of a built-in, obviously Marvel and Disney help, but it's a newer star to try and build. It taking the second biggest box office of the pandemic is kind of huge news. It's also apparently Labor Day is a movie weekend. It's the biggest Labor Day weekend of all time at 76 million. And the runner-up was 2007's Halloween at 26 million. So apparently,
that's crazy.
I know. Doesn't it seem like Labor? I mean, I guess the argument is box office is teenagers. And teenagers are all Labor Day weekend getting ready to go back to school or something?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like
all families are on vacation and at the beach.
Yeah, it's like the last weekend before everything gets cold again, I guess. It feels like, I don't know. That's interesting though. I would have assumed, I mean, I feel like I'm always at the theater on Labor Day weekend.
I feel like people are traveling, other people are traveling and therefore do not want to see movies because they're out seeing the world.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is a lot of travel on Labor Day weekend, which is a great thing. You should travel on Labor Day weekend. I never really travel on Labor Day weekend because as a professor, it's usually my semester's either started or it's last minute prep for the semester. So I will often see a movie on Labor Day weekend, but I didn't see Halloween in 2007. Before we get into talking about the relevant stuff here, I just want to point out that when I Googled it, I got 3 headlines. The Guardian had a headline about how representation in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings made up for all the flaws in Mulan. And then CNBC just had a very simple one about how Shang-Chi hit a record number. And then Fox News, Shang-Chi made this major NASCAR mistake, which is almost like a cliche of Fox News headlines, like trying to pander to NASCAR. And
I feel like if you wrote that, it would be like kind of hacky.
If this was a 30 Rock joke, people would be like, all right, well, that's the first option, but that's a placeholder for a better joke later.
I do not even remember there being race cars in the movie.
So there's no race cars in the movie. At one point, the star Simu Liu and Awkwafina get in a car when they're valet drivers, and Awkwafina says Jeff Gordon is the winningest driver in NASCAR history. And actually, he's the 3rd winningest. The winningest is Richard Petty.
Oh, my God.
That makes this a petty headline. Boom. Yeah, not a major mistake when someone makes a joke. It also seems in character for the type of character. I haven't seen the film yet, but the types of characters where you cast Awkwafina, her knowledge of NASCAR trivia might not be the most accurate. And I think
Completely
it's fine.
agree.
I do not expect every character in every movie to be like a pedant who's memorized Wikipedia. You can be wrong. A character can be wrong about who's the winningest driver in NASCAR without the movie being wrong. And that's certainly not the headline.
I just love the thought of someone in the middle of the movie being like, oh boy, I'm going to write an article about that later.
Yeah.
It's just such a funny
if you're
thing
the
to think
Fox
about.
News writer who's movie reviewing, you're actively watching, looking for things to pick at to inflame culture war bullshit. The interesting thing here about this movie from a filmmaker's perspective is Black Widow hit $80 million back in July, but was a simultaneous day and date release. They were in the theater and on Disney Plus same day. But there's this ongoing debate, which many people have an opinion about, Soderbergh and presidents of Warner Brothers and many people, about whether or not it is important to preserve what we call the theatrical window, like having it in the theaters before it's at home, to try and drive people who are excited to see it into theater. This movie, Shang-Chi, did that. It is theater only at the moment. You cannot see it on Disney Plus yet. And some people are saying that probably drove a higher box office number. And honestly, I have to say, as a filmmaker, that's great. I want studios that want to release movies in theaters first, because like if the studio's motivation is more money, whatever, as long as it's getting movies in theaters where I like seeing movies, that's awesome. You saw it over the weekend, Kath.
Yeah, I did. I didn't love it, which I'm so sad about. Everyone else loves it. I obviously, being Chinese American, am really into the Asian American themes. Loved all the actors. I thought the performances were fantastic. You know, there's a lot to like about the movie. Where I had an issue was like the plot line was so circuitous, very just sort of weighted down. I mean, we talk about this with superhero movies all the time. They're trying to do so many things. It's really hard to get it all right. But ultimately, I just felt like, why are we here? Wait, why are they going over there? Why do they need to do this? How are these characters actually feeling? They're all making decisions that aren't really motivated by genuine interest. They're motivated by plot. Just like major, what I thought to be writing flaws. I would love to like figure out how the sausage gets made in terms of like the script for these superhero movies, because they just, so many of them end up being kind of disappointing.
Yeah, they feel like they've like just got noted to death, and it kind of stole whatever essence might have been like powerful about it. I'm assuming I haven't seen the movie yet, so I'm just trying to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some. I'm sorry, Todd. I didn't mean to cut you off, but like,
no, you're good.
There are lots of great things about it, and then there's a couple of moments where it feels like they're trying to sort of like pander to the Asian American audience. So like this family where the dad has lived for over 1,000 years, and they have this like really cool sort of ageless compound that they live in as a family. At one point, there's a scene where they're like playing Dance Dance Revolution in the living room, and I'm like, I don't know where I am right now. Just like, I'm super confused. Okay.
So you're telling me in 1,000 years of life, you wouldn't at least try DDR to see if it helped alleviate some weekend boredom?
I am a huge fan of DDR. I used to play DDR every day when I was in middle school and high school. But like this family in Shang-Chi, like it's part of a flashback where they're reminiscing on like the good times that they had when the kids were young. And one of them is like them playing DDR. And I'm like, this feels like someone told them to put this scene in the movie, and it makes no sense.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, feeling like you're being pandered to in any way is always disappointing, because you're like, I would like you to treat me like an equal, respectful. I mean, no one actually, I take it back. Everyone panders to me racially as a white dude. Like, it's all racial pandering, but like specifically like that kind of thing. But like other things where I'm like, oh, that's fan service. Oh, you're just
right.
Like that doesn't actually make coherent sense within the world you're building. You are doing things, but like it really begs the question of how much a filmmaker is supposed to be engaged with an audience. Like at what point, like how much are you making exactly the movie you want to make true unto itself, and how much do you want to like engage with continuing to keep audience interest? Because like if that's during like, yeah, it's a complicated thing making a movie, and like where you meet the audience and where you leave the audience.
Yeah. I will say there were a couple scenes where the characters do karaoke, and I'm like, this is fine. This is okay. The Dance Dance Revolution, not so sure. But anyway, that's a very minor note. I think overall, I applaud the filmmakers. I applaud the studio for making an Asian American film. Clearly, I hope they've learned that there is an audience for this, so they should continue down this road. And I will say also, like, all of the actors' fluency in Mandarin and English was really impressive. And that, like, the whole first, 30 to 45 minutes of the film is, like, all in Chinese. And I'm way down for that.
The fact that exists and wasn't in any of the articles, even the Fox News article I read about the film, it sort of says something about where, like, can you, like in the 90s, if a movie started with 30 minutes in another language, it would be in every review.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're now in a place where it's like, no, you might read subtitles for 30 minutes. I remember in the 90s talking to friends who were like, I won't even watch a movie with subtitles.
That is
And
so
like,
wild.
I know, it's insane. I mean, the 90s. And now we've like come to a place where it's like, oh, you can open a big blockbuster action movie and it makes sense that this should be in this language. So let's have it be in that language. As opposed to some of the other like twisty, turny things that people have done where it's like, all right, well, it's all going to be in English and people will just have accents for these scenes. And you're like, does that always work? I don't know that it works. I don't know that it makes sense.
That's one of the things that actually I really appreciate about this film, because it's just like, no fucks given. Yeah, it's going to be in Chinese. And I watch it and I'm like, this is, I'm glad that I am like having to read subtitles right now because I don't speak Chinese, because that feels like authentic to the film. DDR, not so much, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is no perfect film that lands every beat. And it seems like excessive inclusion of DDR. I wonder if DDR paid for it. I don't even know who developed it, but like product placement can sometimes be a little clunkers.
Yeah.
Because that's also one of those things of like with these big studio movies, like people go out looking for product placement early in the process before the script. So it's entirely possible at some point they were like, all right, who are the brands that we might want to get product placement from? And somebody was like, ooh, DDR, let's call them.
Get DDR. Yeah. Well, there's a scene in the movie where they're flying in a helicopter in the 1,000-year-old dad's helicopter going back to this like compound that exists in, some realm of no time and space. And they're in this helicopter and they're all wearing Bose headphones. And I'm like, I don't think wearing Bose headphones.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated with the Marvel films. I mean, we think of them as being huge budget productions, but they all have budget limitations. They're all trying to find ways to do more with less and find ways to find tie-ins. I mean, aside from, I only watched one of the new Jurassic Park movies, but like it's a Mercedes ad. Like it's just one long, there's so many Benzes in that new Jurassic Park movie. I was like, this is totally ridiculous. And then, I mean, Captain Marvel is partially supported by the Air Force. Like Captain Marvel is effectively an Air Force recruitment tool. So one of the challenges I think any filmmaker faces, the like Air Force involvement in Captain Marvel, I think up to and includes Captain Marvel cast doing like promo things about the Air Force.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's like, it's an interesting, like, yeah.
One thing I wonder about is, I mean, with streaming stuff becoming, the norm is like, I think I read about this or heard about it, or maybe it's in the works or something, but the whole concept of like having ads like actually changing, like you'd buy ad space on a streaming movie for a certain period of time, and then that they could actually change it after the fact. So like if you have like a billboard in a movie, they could like change
like if it's Ted Lasso, and it's all, any sports pitch is wrapped in ads now, and you could change those.
Yeah, exactly. Which
I think it also
kind of a weird thought.
It also sort of begs the question. I mean, I remember dealing with this a lot. The production company I had used to do a lot of music video stuff, and like we worked on a will.i.am video, and like of course his weird headphone products were going to be in those, but like it shows up in a lot of other music videos now, product placement, because that is one of the ways you can pay for a video. And I think it is interesting as a filmmaker to debate how you want to interact with product placement in your movies, because it is often, I've worked on $100,000 movies where product placement was part of it, which is crazy, but it is everywhere. It is part of how you offset parts of your budget. And like, you do want to think about as you go into this, where you want to draw the line. And I think like promoting Bose headphones, like they are the best of the noise canceling headphones, although I personally own monoprice because they're like a quarter of the price, but the Bose are very good. Like supporting DDR, like more people, like there are definitely people who learned about DDR from Shang-Chi, and that rules probably, right?
I'd be surprised because it's been around for so long, but yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, some 15-year-old
it's like,
watching
what's that game?
Yeah, what's that game? Can I play that game? Is that like still an available thing for the PS12 or whatever? So yeah, I mean, it is sort of a thing as we navigate our careers. If we have ambitions to try and make anything on a big scale like that, part of the conversation is always going to be the involvement, unless you're working on an ancient Rome piece. Although I feel like there's like weird stuff where product placement shows up in like Westerns and period films too. feel like I saw some film set in the 20s or 30s, which clearly had a Ford or GM tie-in. It's not coming to mind, but I will remember it eventually, where you're like, that seems placey to me. Yeah, it's really tricky. It is a complicated thing.
This episode is brought to you by HP Plus. In a world full of smart devices, shouldn't your printer be smart too? It is with HP Plus. These printers know when they're running low, so you always get the ink you need delivered right when you need it. Plus, you save up to 50% on ink, so you can print whatever you want, as much as you want, anytime you want. Huh, that is pretty smart. Get 6 free months of instant ink when you choose HP Plus. Conditions apply. Visit hp.com/smart for details.
All right, let's move on to Good Deal, Bad Deal. So Good Deal, Bad Deal is a newer segment on our thing where we talk about deals. We're going to talk about a deal today that I think is universally a bad deal, but often gets sold as a good deal. And I just wanted to talk about some examples from our lives with it, because I have a couple of good ones. So we're recording this on Labor Day. And to be clear, this is not a deal anyone above us offered. The three of us, on an email thread, figured out a time that worked for all of us. I believe we are all happy to be here. If you two are mad about being here on Labor Day, this will be a good time to hash it out in public.
Yeah, I'm low key kind of pissed about it. So just
all right.
I was
let's get into
thinking about
it.
canceling this morning, but I am here.
No, JK, I'm good.
But in my career in film, I have been offered many, many, many opportunities to work on holidays. It has always been sold to me as either A, this has to happen for whatever reason involving client delivery schedules or whatever, or B, this is an opportunity where you're getting this opportunity on the job that's like 2 or 3 steps up higher on the ladder than you would normally get, because the bigger people are obviously taking their holiday. And I just want to flat out say I did it a bunch. Universally, after the bigger people 2 or 3 steps up the ladder for me came back from holiday, they ended up keeping I never turned anybody into a new client that I did year-round work with by working on holidays. They would hire me on the holiday, and then they'd go back to working with the normal people they would when the holidays were done. And so I think it is a universally bad deal to work on holidays. Now, there's these borderline exceptions, which is there is in LA, there's this event called Coachella, which half of LA, literally Silver Lake was a ghost town every year during Coachella. And I would always book work during Coachella because I couldn't care less. And that's technically like working on a holiday, because all the other people who did what I did were probably at Coachella. So I was available and they weren't. And I feel like NAB and Cinegear were the same thing. I missed a lot of NABs and Cinegears because all the other DPs were at NAB or Cinegear. And if somebody needed something shot, I could book 3 or 4 steps above my level. But if you work in commercials, you're going to end up getting a lot of holiday work because of the Super Bowl. And even if it's not a Super Bowl spot, because all the other companies are working on Super Bowl spots, they're passing on jobs that then you're in the running for. And for 5 or 6 years of my life, Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, by default, I was in the office. There was one time I was even in the office Christmas morning until about noon. And I think it's always a bad deal.
Terrible.
There was one year on New Year's, I was in the office with 2 clients who were a married couple who couldn't agree on anything. And we were there until 9:30 at night. And finally I was I got to go because I wanted to go to a New Year's Eve party.
It's freaking New Year's. Yeah.
I know. And they were oh my God, yeah, I could totally understand. It must be really rough when you have a difficult client. And I was you are a married couple who fought for the last 8 hours. You are a difficult client. I'm just trying to work with you. And then another year, everybody in the office, 10 of us worked through the holidays. I'm not going to say the name of the pop star, but it was for a pop star who, the Monday after New Year's, was apparently expecting to see the video. And so we worked. Everyone was in the office Christmas Eve. Everyone was in the office New Year's Eve. I think New Year's Day, we were in the office by 1 or 2 in the afternoon, accounting for party recovery. We sent it through, I think it was January 4th. That was the Monday after New Year's. And then we didn't hear any notes for a week. And then finally, January 11th, we checked in and they were oh, actually, she decided to holiday on this Caribbean island where there's no internet. So she hasn't seen it yet.
My God.
So
that is such a common thing.
Oh my
no
God.
one told us. And it was so infuriating. It was why did we just do
that's
that?
My biggest pet peeve is when you're really stretching yourself to finish something and you send it over and it didn't matter. And that happens so much. That happens to me once a month, I feel where it's I'll just completely sacrifice myself to the altar of whatever project it is. And the next day with bags under my eyes, I'm what did they think of it? Did they like what I made? And they're oh, they're actually out today. And I'm just like burning white hot rage. Like, oh my gosh, I hate that so much. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on all this because for me, the thing that kind of comes to my mind about it is sort of kind of what you just said. Like the whole working on the holiday thing, for me, one thing is, and like, I just always feel like whatever you're working on in this industry, for whoever your client is, it's the most important thing in the world. Like, it's like, there's never like a low key project. It's like, no, this is their big priority on every level. So it has to get done the way I want it to get done or whatever. And you work on a holiday and it almost every single time, it just ends up not really mattering that you did that. Like, it's just kind of like, oh, I could have just done that tomorrow. I mean, it would have been the same thing. And it's like this feeling of, I don't know if you guys ever have this feeling like where like, oh, I wish I had like a normal job. Like, I wish I could just be like an accountant or something and just like have holidays and like go fishing when I feel like it and like be a person and like not be, not watch from afar as my wife and daughter get to go to the park and have fun, but I'm like stuck editing some dumb edit and it doesn't matter. And I could have just waited till tomorrow. Like, I'm just, yeah, I think a lot of this is very fresh on my mind right now because these are a lot of things that I'm like currently in the throes of like reprioritizing things and like making sure that I don't end up working on holidays unless it's recording a podcast for a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of things that I think, I don't know. When you work on holidays, I feel like to that client, then you become the person who works on holidays.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's like, do you really want that to be your brand? Because like I think there's some sort of intrinsic value and perceived value to being the person who goes, no, I don't work on holidays.
Right.
I feel like there's like a certain like, oh, that person might be a badass because they're like making demands. Like I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I'm actually, so I work, as I mentioned before on this podcast, I work a full-time job. I work for an ad agency. So all of these issues are a part of our everyday. And like, yes, on the one hand, I have this sort of like full-time position where I can technically take holiday at any time. But even in this full-time job, I'm still struggling to learn to take holidays and still struggling to like put up those boundaries because every day is a sprint. We're always dealing with clients who want stuff now.
Right.
And so I am constantly like, well, can I take 2 weeks off or can I even take like 2 days off in this month? I don't feel like I can. I'm just going to save it until the end of the year. And I'm actually personally now reaching a point where I'm almost at burnout. I had to take Thursday and Friday off last week just to chill out because I was
good
like,
for you. I'm glad you did that.
I was like about
you
to
saw that come.
rage quit my job.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, both with working on actual federal holidays and like respecting your own holidays, it's like about knowing in advance. And I think this is something that comes with more time spent in the industry and more maturity in general. But it really does feel like it takes a long time to develop this skill of just saying like, yeah, Labor Day weekend, I am not working. Like George is not here today. George knows what's up.
George was like, y'all can figure it out.
Total respect for the boss move of power move of not working holiday.
Yeah,
but
and none of us are like, why isn't George here? None of us are like, George is letting down the podcast. You know what I mean?
George has failed us.
It never actually matters. Like unless you like work for the president or something, and like they're about to give a speech tomorrow, like. It never really actually matters. Like
I would say even that doesn't matter, honestly. When's the last time you watched end-to-end a speech from a politician?
Never.
Yeah.
Who wasn't AOC?
Grade school. Oh, yeah, fair.
Yeah. I think unless you're working in a medical field where like you are the organ delivery person and someone needs to be on for every day. My old roommate did that because she was like, I'm not squeamish and it's great money for an actor. And so she was like an actor who delivered organs.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, actors got to figure out some way where you're like, I never miss an audition. I just pass on delivering that organ that day because organ delivery is freelance. But yeah, it's brilliant. But I wanted to talk about this, even though we all think it's a bad deal, because I remember getting sold on this so many times. Even that pop star video I just talked about was like, first time working with that creative agency, first time working with that record label, first time working with a pop star that big. We got it because we were young and hungry and stupid and willing to like work everybody to death through the holidays And like, it gets sold as like, this is just how you got to break your bones. This is how you do it. And like, if anybody's not following IA Stories is a great Instagram account. Everybody should follow it. Kath just sent me something from it yesterday. And like, everybody gets this pressure. Everybody gets these speeches. Everybody gets this bullshit. And it's like, no, this is Labor Day. Like, this is the day that is meant to celebrate working people by letting them out of work. Like, every store that's closed today, I respect. Every restaurant that's closed today, I respect. Like, this is a day where like working people are supposed to rest. Podcasting is pretty close to rest. So I'm not going to feel that guilty about the fact that we're podcasting today, because it's like, I'm not shoveling while we do this. I'm literally lying down while we do this. But
I'm playing Fortnite right now.
Yeah, but it's like, respect. So, well, except you're doing like twice the labor. But I wanted a universal bad deal for Labor Day to be like, over and over in your career, this like working on a holiday thing is going to come up, and like, remember that like George isn't here. Remember, it's okay not to work a holiday, and you need to be a sane human. And yeah, it's like, it's an important one.
And burnout, sorry, just really quickly, burnout comes so fast. Like, you could be trucking along after working, 8 days in a row, 12 hours a day, and feel like I'm doing okay. Like, I think I can make it to the weekend. And then on that 9th day, be like, this is effing terrible. Like, I hate everyone. And like burnout happens. It just comes up really quickly. And so it's important to sort of be aware of that. And speaking, like at my agency, like I had a moment on Tuesday where I was like, I should just quit right now. At that point, we'd already like burned through 3 different vendors on this one project that's been killing us, because this client is like quite demanding, because we're all just like trying to do the best work, but then like have all let our boundaries slip and ended up working later than we usually do, ended up working weekends. So all that to say, just like protect yourself,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, moving on. We've got 2 tech stories this week. First up, in tech news, Red has announced a new camera, the brand new V-Raptor, which is an interesting name. I mean, I like Red's names. Red's names are ridiculous.
Names are so wheels off, man. It's so funny.
I haven't heard the expression wheels off before, but I like it.
It's just like they're, I don't know, like they're just, and like the font is just so like beefy and like bold. Like, I don't know. It's all very bro culture, and I can't decide how I feel about it. I've always been like, Monstro, really? Okay. Weapon. That was funny. There was one called Red Weapon.
Oh yeah, but they got rid of that really quickly because they were like tired of, like, if you've ever tried to take a camera in and out of customs, you get pinged on everything.
Yeah.
I remember getting stuck in the Lima, Peru airport because the Steadicam guy and I on a job were flying back together, and like, oh my God, trying to get a Steadicam through customs, like, because it's not recognized. Like, if you don't work in entertainment, all the pieces of a Steadicam don't make a lot of sense.
Oh yeah,
and
they look like,
and they assume
like,
you're
this
trying
guy
to
has like
import
12 machine guns.
Yeah, exactly. And like, just like, did we miss the flight? We had 24 hours of travel that day because of the Steadicam guy, who's a really nice guy. I don't fault him for it, but like, it's a big deal. So like, naming something Weapon and then trying to get it through customs all over the world for the rest of time, like, that was just DUMB dumb. But the V-Raptor, really interesting update from Red for a bunch of reasons. So it's an 8K VistaVision size sensor, which, if you remember the Monstro, also an 8K VistaVision size sensor. And as far as we can tell right now, it's the same sensor, which I love that Red did that. And I'm going to talk in a bit about why I love that Red did that. Before we get to that, though, it's a brand new body. So the Red body is something called the DSMC, the Digital Stills and Motion Camera. This is the 3rd revision, so it's DSMC 3. Red cameras are popular for their very small body size. Like, if you have no accessories on it, it's a great camera for a gimbal, great camera for action. It's the reason why they used it on the Suicide Squad. For some reason, people on the internet like to say Red cameras don't look good, which baffles me, because like the Suicide Squad looked great, shot on Red cam. Like, I don't understand why. Like, the internet just loves to be like, the only good-looking camera is Alexa. And I'm like, no, you can also actually make Red look great. Alexas look slightly better naturally, but you can tweak a Red to get there. And but the big deal is autofocus. So autofocus has gotten really good lately. In the last few years, autofocus really come into its own. But at the top end cinema, where you're getting all the cinema features you want, you haven't really had autofocus. And this is the first camera that, like, natively, the lens mount is an RF mount specifically. There's like a PL adapter if you want to use old non-autofocus lenses, but it's built for autofocus in cinema. And like, that is a headline that is really interesting, because we've seen amazing autofocus in the Sony a7S III and amazing autofocus in the Canon R5. And like, let's be real, the Sony FX9 autofocus is basically like magic. But none of those are quite like full-on cinema cameras, right? And in terms of the features we're looking for at a cinema camera, like massive sensor, massive dynamic range, really great color reproduction, internal RAW, robust timecode tools, robust audio I/O, like that's what we want out of a cinema camera. And this is the first, like, oh, we have the full thing with autofocus.
How far do you think we are from Cine lenses having autofocus capabilities, like on a large scale?
So I think Panavision are going to be the people who do it first. And I think Panavision are going to be the people who do it first, because Panavision sort of gave up on making their own camera bodies smartly, because the Genesis was not great. Panavision was never really about the camera body, although Millennium's a great body, but like Panavision was always about the lenses. And so with the new DXLs, it's just a really nice red camera with Panavision glass. And so I think the DXL3, which will be built on this new V-Raptor, presumably, will then have like real cine lenses with beautiful autofocus. And that will be really interesting. And, you know, the DXL2 was a bigger hit than a lot of people remember. It's all over. Lots of things shoot on it. A lot of big DPs love it. Panavision has great infrastructure for supporting big TV shows and movies and great loyalty there. So I think that's where we'll see it. I think we're still 5 years away.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Like, no, I just thought it was interesting. Like because as of right now, it's just all the RF lenses are the only ones. So it's like, it's weird to have, this 8K camera that can essentially use like, I mean, the still lenses, which is not really something that occurred to me. I mean, those are great lenses though. Like, I mean, those are really good lenses. I'm mostly I'm intrigued about the RF mount thing about this camera, in terms of like, I don't know if I think I kind of view that as a negative a little bit, but I think it's just a sign of like basically where everything is heading. And that's why I ask, like, I wonder, how long it'll be before, on narrative sets, we're seeing a lot of autofocus.
Well, the lenses are coming out more slowly than they want. I remember at the FX9 launch, Sony announced that they were going to do a whole lineup of autofocus cine lenses, and we were all psyched. We were like, okay, Sony, with the alphas, you've really proven that you've got autofocus on lock, but we would still have to use your still photo lenses to do it. And, still photo lenses and cinema lenses are slightly different. They're beautiful, beautiful still lenses, but they still have some drawbacks that don't work in motion, like heavy breathing or, different flare characteristics, sensor to sensor. They're not telecentric, something like that. So like, we wanted some real cine lenses that did autofocus. And Sony announced with the FX9 that they were also, within, I think, a year of the FX9, there was going to be like a full set of autofocus cine lenses. The FX9's been around for 2 years. There's been a pandemic, but like, I haven't seen in the field those autofocus cine lenses. All of the Panavision DXL lenses, though, have internal motors. So the whole DXL lineup is ready, meaning that, from the beginning of DXL, you take one of those Panavision, Super Primos or whatever they're called, you pop it on, and you don't need to put on external motors for focus, iris, and zoom. You can just attach, like, there's a couple of different like remote controls you can use to do all your focus, iris, and zoom powered by the camera body. So I suspect that DSMC3, because the lenses are already there, now that the body's ready, because the thing about the first DXL and the second DXL is you actually need like stuff happening at the sensor for phase detect autofocus, PDAF as it's called, to work. And the cameras weren't ready to power the autofocus in the lenses. But now that the camera's ready to power the autofocus in the lenses, I feel like we're going to start seeing it more and more. And the interesting thing about Panavision is people will rent the DXL3 whenever it's out next year, because it's Panavision and because they want all that support infrastructure and stuff. and the autofocus will just be there, and then they'll try it out. They won't have to, like previously, if you wanted to try the autofocus, you had to try a package you wouldn't have used anyway in order to get that feature. But now that feature is just going to be there on a package you would anyway be using.
Can I
Right.
ask like a novice question?
Yeah, please.
When you say autofocus, are we talking about like the camera fully decides what it's focusing on all the time? Or
So
like you
with the
point
FX9, you can set it to like face detect or eye detect, and it will literally like follow a person as they walk around. You can see little like face detect bubbles that will pop up on the faces, and you can like pick what face it follows and switch faces in the middle
while
of the
you're
take.
rolling?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could like a lot of them have like a touch screen where like as you're rolling, you just get kind of used to like just tapping on a person's face or something, and it'll switch over to that. Like especially if you want to do like a rack focus or something. But I definitely there's definitely still a lot of room for growth on that side of things, especially if you were to try to use it for narrative filmmaking. Also, I mean, I feel like autofocus looks kind of unnatural. Like so, if you do tap on someone else's face, it's gonna do like a really fast, like machine like sort of focus. So, and a lot of times you can like change settings and stuff. But yeah, no, it's like the phase detect thing. It's like looking for actual motion. And I also, I mean, for like the third podcast in a row where I'm talking about LiDAR, I do think LiDAR in conjunction with camera stuff is going to be a thing too. I think if LiDAR, because then it's really sensing depth and all that sort of stuff. And I think I don't know, I think that's going to be a thing.
I really love, Todd, that you just brought up that like the autofocus, like a racking focus through autofocus feels like a machine's doing it instead of a human, because I think that is something that would startle me as a viewer.
Yeah, it looks like, it makes it look like video or whatever. And that's
But
the thing,
But my theory on that is some of that is because it's still photo lenses, which are not designed
agreed.
for smooth focus moves, because the still photo lenses only job is focus as fast as physically possible.
Right.
Whereas a motion picture lens, if you like turn the wheel, there should be like a little fluid drag to it, and it should be feathered. And I suspect Panavision has their act together enough that like Panavision glass tethered to DSM-C3 body, we might actually see some digital autofocus that looks a little silkier, is my guess.
It'd be cool if you could like even like turn on a setting to like accidentally overshoot a little bit and come back, like just give it that sort of like purposefully go out of focus for a second. Like
give it that using quality.
Yeah,
that comes up a lot in all sorts of areas of robotics, where they're like, where are the places where we work in a little messiness that we would expect from messiness, and like how do we mimic actual human messiness? Yeah, I could totally see that. I could totally see like dial in a little artificial humanity.
Yeah,
you can turn up and down a knob for a little bit of artificiality. The other big thing I find really exciting about this is that, as far as I can tell, other than adding PDAF technology, this isn't a major sensor revolution. Like usually with Red, it's like there's a new sensor and it's like we're adding a -X to the name. This is like the Mysterium, then this is the Mysterium -X, or this is the, there's always a new, and they're not really pushing that this time, other than the addition of the technology needed for PDAF. And I kind of like that, because if you remember Alexa's been using the same sensor since 2008. You buy a newer Alexa body, you're getting more slow-mo features, you're getting like internal RAW, but you're not getting a different sensor. And like, I think it's a little bit of maturity from Red that they're like, oh, actually, this sensor is pretty great. And you can get, we've all seen beautiful things shot on the 8K VV. And so like, they're improving it. They're adding, what's needed for PDAF, but like the marketing is not pushing it as like a complete sensor redesign.
Yeah, I completely agree. Because that's always been one of the more like confusing aspects of Red's offering, like the intersection between the different brains and the different sensors, and then you have all the different DSMC stuff and all that. So yeah, the more they can simplify it, the better. They are just like almost like constantly comparing this camera to the Monstro, just to the Ranger Monstro, and it appears to be like they showed it appears to be like almost identical. I think what they changed mostly was the red code. So like the way that the sensor, debayers and all that sort of stuff in camera and all that. I think it's all they've optimized that a little bit. Like I think the Red Code HQ in this camera is like way higher quality than the Monstros was, which is interesting because the Monstro is like a $60,000 camera, and this one is like 25K.
24.5.
There we go.
Which I think is a good price point for them.
I mean, I think that's another kind of sign of the times, and also a sign of growth, in my opinion, is they priced it kind of like it's still higher than the best C300 model or C500 model, whatever, but it's not, it's not like the cost of a amazing car. It's like a cost of a car that someone like me would drive.
Yeah. And it's got, and it's about the cost of like a C700 full frame, but unlike the C700 full frame, it will not have nearly the rolling shutter problems because Red has worked a lot on that. It's not a global shutter like the Komodo, but it's got a very fast refresh rate, so you will not be dealing with.
Yeah, that was an interesting. I expected them to have global shutter, and when they didn't, they were like, "But it's better. It's not. It's still it's not going to have really bad rolling shutter." So I was like, "Oh, we'll be the judge of that."
I mean, if it's going to be an improvement, I mean, the 8K VistaVision rolling shutter is not that bad, and bringing autofocus to the masses, I think it's worth the trade-off.
Agreed.
All right, and then final tech news of the week. Fuji, and I know many of you who are like Canon or Sony loyalists are like, why do they talk about Fuji?